Welcome, listeners, to a journey back in time, to an era when the world was young, and the whispers of ancient gods echoed through the lands of Mesopotamia. Imagine a time when stories were not just tales, but the very fabric of human understanding, explaining the mysteries of creation and destruction. Today, we dive into one of the oldest narratives ever recorded, a story of a great flood that reshaped the world as our ancestors knew it. This is the Sumerian Flood Story, also known as the Eridu Genesis, a mesmerizing epic that predates even the biblical tale of Noah. So, sit back, let your imagination wander, and let's uncover the secrets of a civilization lost to the sands of time. Brought to you by the World History Encyclopedia and the Study of Antiquity and the Middle Ages. Let's set the stage for this incredible tale. The Sumerian Flood Story is not just any story. It is believed to be the earliest written account of a great deluge, a catastrophic flood sent by divine forces to cleanse the earth. Dated to around 2,300 years before the Common Era in its written form, this story likely existed much earlier, passed down through generations by word of mouth before being etched onto clay tablets. Though the tablet we have today is damaged, with many lines missing, its essence remains clear. Scholars often turn to later works like the Akkadian Babylonian epic, Atrahasis, to fill in the gaps, as it tells a strikingly similar tale. This ancient narrative, originating in the cradle of civilization, is thought to have influenced later flood stories, including the Egyptian Book of the Heavenly Cow, from around 2181 to 2040 years before the Common Era, as well as the Epic of Gilgamesh and most famously, the story of Noah in the biblical book of Genesis, dated to around 1,450 years before the Common Era. The discovery of this story is a tale in itself, one that unfolds in the 19th century during a time of great curiosity and exploration. Western institutions, including museums and universities, poured resources into expeditions across Mesopotamia, driven by a desire to find physical proof that would support the historical accuracy of biblical accounts. This was an era of questioning, a time when long-held beliefs about the Bible's divine origin were being challenged. Critical readings of sacred texts were on the rise, and groundbreaking works like Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species, published in 1859, suggested that humans evolved from primates rather than being created by a divine hand. Meanwhile, the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, in his 1882 work, The Gay Science, famously declared, "God is dead, and we have killed him," reflecting the growing influence of technology and secular thought over traditional religious beliefs. Before this wave of skepticism, the Bible was widely regarded as the oldest and most original book in the world, believed to be directly inspired by God. This view was reinforced by figures like Archbishop James Ussher, who lived from 1581 to 1656. Ussher created a chronology, based largely on the book of Genesis, that dated the creation of the world to the 22nd of October, 4,004 years before the Common Era, at 6 in the evening. According to this perspective, the Bible was infallible, a perfect guide not just for spiritual matters but for understanding the history and age of the earth itself. The expeditions to Mesopotamia were meant to confirm this belief, to uncover evidence that would validate the biblical narrative. Instead, what they found turned everything upside down, as cuneiform tablets were unearthed and deciphered from the mid-19th century onward. They revealed stories, symbols, and themes that mirrored those in the Bible, but predated them by centuries. Among these discoveries was the Sumerian Flood Story, found in 1893 in the ruins of the ancient city of Nippur during an expedition funded by the University of Pennsylvania. This small, badly damaged tablet remained untranslated until 1912, when German Assyriologist Arno Pogel, who lived from 1881 to 1958, decoded it as part of his work for the same university. The existence of a flood story older than the biblical account of Noah suggested to some that traditional interpretations of the Bible needed re-evaluation. Others argued it supported the biblical narrative, just from a different cultural lens. However, not everyone agreed with this latter view. British archaeologist Sir Leonard Woolley, who lived from 1880 to 1960, challenged the idea of a global flood during his excavations at the ancient city of Ur in the 1920s. During the 1928 to 1929 excavation season, Woolley dug deep shafts into the soil and found evidence of significant flooding in the region. But he concluded that these floods were local, not worldwide, caused by the overflowing of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. These events were not singular but occurred multiple times over history. Other archaeologists across Mesopotamia reached similar conclusions, further questioning the originality and historical accuracy of the biblical flood narrative. Archbishop Ussher's chronology was also dismissed by many scholars, though it remains upheld by some modern Christians who adhere to the young earth perspective. Scholar Stephanie Daly, reflecting on further excavations throughout the 20th century, notes that no flood deposits have been found in strata from the 3rd millennium before the Common Era. She also points out that Ussher's calculated date for the flood, set at 2,349 years before the Common Era based on literal interpretations of Genesis, is now considered outdated due to the highly schematic nature of the early biblical chronology. The discovery of the Sumerian Flood Story at Nippur, despite its missing sections, gave researchers like Woolley the academic freedom to challenge long-standing assumptions about the flood in ways that would have been unimaginable just a century earlier. Now, let's dive into the heart of the story itself. The Sumerian Flood Story begins with the creation of the world, introducing the black-headed people, as the Sumerians called themselves, along with the animals that roamed the earth. The gods responsible for this act of creation, An, Enlil, Enki, and Nin-Hursag, were among the most revered deities in Sumerian culture for centuries, until their prominence was overshadowed by later theological shifts under rulers like Hammurabi of Babylon, who reigned from 1792 to 1750 years before the Common Era, and the rise of Assyrian influence. After creating humans and animals, the gods established cities, starting with Eridu, believed to be the oldest city in the world. Each city is assigned a patron deity, a tradition that shaped Sumerian society, where every urban center had its own divine protector. The narrative also hints at the development of irrigation systems, a critical innovation for a civilization thriving in the arid lands between two great rivers. Unfortunately, parts of the tablet are missing at this point, leaving gaps in the story. These lost lines likely explain why the leading gods of the Sumerian pantheon, and Enlil, decided to destroy humanity with a great flood. In the later Atrahasis epic, the reason is clear. Humans had become too numerous and too noisy, disturbing Enlil's rest. In that version, Enlil first sends a drought, then a plague, and finally a famine to reduce the population and silence the clamor. Each time, however, Enki, the god of wisdom and a friend to humanity, intervenes by advising people on how to counteract Enlil's punishments, allowing them to survive. It's reasonable to assume similar details appeared in the earlier Sumerian flood story, where Enki plays a comparable role as humanity's protector. The narrative resumes with all the gods swearing an oath, presumably agreeing not to interfere with Enlil's decision to wipe out humanity. Here, the central figure of the story is introduced, Ziusudra, the priest-king of the city of Shuruppak, whose name translates to Life of Long Days. This character appears under different names in later tales, as Atrahasis, meaning exceedingly wise, in the epic bearing his name, as Utnapishtim, he found life, in the epic of Gilgamesh, and as Noah, meaning rest or peace, in the book of Genesis. Since Enki is bound by the oath not to interfere directly, he finds a clever workaround. He speaks to a wall, knowing Ziusudra is on the other side and will overhear his warning about the impending flood. More missing lines follow, which likely described Ziusudra building a massive boat and filling it with animals and the seed of mankind to preserve life. When the story picks up again, it vividly portrays the flood raging for 7 days and 7 nights. The seas eventually calm, and Utu, the sun god also known as Shamash, emerges, illuminating the world once more. Ziusudra drills a hole in the side of the boat, allowing Utu's rays to enter. In gratitude, Ziusudra offers a sacrifice to the god, though further details are lost due to additional missing lines. In the end, it seems an Anenlil regret their decision to destroy humanity. They express gratitude to Ziusudra for preserving their creations and grant him eternal life in the paradise of Dilmun, a mythical land often associated with eternal peace and abundance. Fragments suggest the story continued for another 39 lines after this apparent conclusion, but their content remains a mystery. The text we have, as compiled by scholars Jeremy Black, Graham Cunningham, Eleanor Robson, and Gaber Zoliomi in The Literature of Ancient Sumer, offers a glimpse into the narrative. It begins with a line about stopping the annihilation of the gods' creatures, possibly hinting that humans were initially created with long lifespans to labor alongside the gods and make the earth a pleasant place. In the later Atrahasis, post-flood measures are taken to limit human lifespans and increase mortality, and such themes may have been part of the missing sections of the Sumerian Flood Story. The surviving text speaks of returning people to their dwelling grounds, building cities for the gods to rest in their shade, and establishing sacred places and irrigation to ensure well-being. It lists the first cities: Eridu given to Nu Dimud, Bad Tibira to a mistress deity, Lak to Pebblesad, Zimbir to the hero Utu, and Shurapak to an An, each distributed with divine oversight. The story describes the flood's devastation as windstorms and gales sweep over the land, rocking Ziusudra's huge boat. After the storm subsides, Utuite returns, and Ziusudra offers sacrifices of oxen and countless sheep. Though more lines are missing, the narrative concludes with an Enlil granting Ziusudra eternal life and settling him in Dilmun, a land where the sun rises, for preserving animals and humanity's seed. This ancient tale is considered the first written record of a worldwide flood myth, a story that appears in nearly every culture of the ancient world. Its universal presence has led some to speculate that a real catastrophic event must have occurred, inspiring independent accounts across different societies. However, modern scholars often reject this idea, proposing instead that an early flood narrative resonated deeply with ancient audiences and spread through trade and travel across regions. Each culture adapted the story to fit its own beliefs and needs, altering it to varying degrees as it was retold and eventually written down. Many scholars, including Stephanie Dalley, believe the Sumerian flood story may be the original source, with Dalley suggesting that all flood myths could derive from this Mesopotamian tale, carried by travelers along the trade routes of Western Asia for over 2,000 years. Translated, embellished, and tailored to local tastes, it evolved into countless versions. The concept of divine wrath causing catastrophic events was a fundamental belief in ancient civilizations, seen as simply how the world operated. The flood story served multiple purposes, primarily explaining the world's creation as people understood it while urging them to heed divine will in their daily lives. In every version of the flood narrative, whether Sumerian, Babylonian, or biblical, the gods or God eventually regret their decision to destroy humanity. In Genesis, God places a rainbow in the sky as a promise never to flood the earth again. Yet, to ancient listeners, this did not mean the divine couldn't send another form of punishment for human disobedience whenever it chose. The story likely encouraged people to err on the side of caution, adhering to religious and cultural norms to maintain the favor of deities who could just as easily destroy as sustain them. As we reflect on this ancient epic, we're reminded of the power of storytelling in shaping human understanding. The Sumerian Flood Story is more than a relic. It's a window into the minds of our earliest ancestors, revealing their fears, hopes, and reverence for forces beyond their control. It's a tale that has echoed through millennia, reminding us of our shared humanity and the timeless quest to make sense of the world around us.